If I can go back to Robert Spillane, when you talk about the communication that is necessary, the communication that used to come from Devin and what he was able to do in a year and a half in that position, how do you approximate that? How do you make up for that? What are the allowances that you have to now make?
Hey, let's be straightforward here, okay? It's not like Devin has been doing it forever. We just handed the keys to Devin here 5 games ago. He was not the green dot or the central communicator in 2019. So, we're very thoughtful about that area. We were not in an area of comfort there. Devin was growing and growing every week. Are we going through a transition? Certainly, but it's not like we had a grizzly veteran in that position who had been handling that job for a number of years. That's something that's been on our radar and something that we've been very conscious of in its development here in 2020. That's just going to continue.
And good evening again, everybody. Welcome to another edition here of the Mass Steel Podcast, where, of course, here's Charles Brod's Richey right now. Just getting started right there. You just heard Mike Tomlin right there talking about how the next guy, more than likely, Robert Spillane, will probably be getting the headset duties, which Devin Bush has been accustomed to this year. And I think Mike Tomlin said it best. I don't think he was slighting Devin Bush by any means, but at the same time, too, I mean, he is still learning this. Been developing. Remember, they had to kind of like mentor him this first year, obviously, number 10 overall pick. But at the same time, too, I really do believe, too, you got to look at it this way. I mean, you got like a ton of depth at this team. Having the guy like Devin Bush being lost for the year with a torn ACL, I mean, we're gonna see how much this is gonna truly affect the run game. But when you have a guy like this right here, an undrafted rookie free agent right here, and you're able to bring this guy here, I mean, we'll see what can happen. I mean, there's a lot of things right now, too. And then we're also going to get into some other scenarios, too, right now, in the next coming weeks. Will the Steelers push the button to make the trade by the November 3rd deadline, which is usually by 4 p.m. Eastern Time, New York, which will be on November 3rd. We'll find that out, and we'll get into a little bit more. Plus, we got some other interesting notable stats going to this week for the Steelers versus Titans showdown. Once again, you can follow me on social media. You can check me out on Twitter and Instagram at Proidgy Richey. For the Mass Steel Podcast on Twitter, it is at Mass Steel CJR. Then on Instagram at Mass Steel Nation right now. Right now, it's going to be this week, a battle of unbeatens right now. As known by Missi Matthews, this will be the first time that the Steelers will face another unbeaten team in week 5 or later of an NFL season. Steelers and Titans are just 2 out of 3 unbeaten teams in the NFL that are left standing. The other right now is the Seattle Seahawks, which recently just had their bye this past weekend after defeating the Minnesota Vikings on a thrilling Sunday Night Football that the Seahawks were able to snatch from the jaws of defeat. And you got our guy Russell Wilson, who's arguably playing at an MVP level when you look at in the NFL. They're making their stamp right as as far as being legit, not just a playoff team, but a Super Bowl contending team right now. Will this finally be the year for the Seattle Seahawks in the NFC that can really get back to the mountaintop once again, to the promised land, you should say, and actually win the Super Bowl? I mean, this is a team right now who really is just taking care of this business at hand, week by week basis. I mean, to see the cordial chemistry right there with Pete Carroll and Russell Wilson. One of the best recent quarterback coaching tandems in memory, I would like to think right now. I mean, these guys just continue to just lay it up and really just give teams fits, especially when in CenturyLink Field in Seattle, too. That 12-man thing is for real. It is continue to just be a noble threat and a true no pushover to any team that comes to challenge them. And right now, the Pittsburgh Steelers versus Tennessee Titans, definitely some interesting matchups for right now going into this weekend. I mean, the good news is right now we just saw the NFL power rankings, which I just tweeted up last night on Twitter. I don't know if many of you got a chance to see that. But I did mention, too, I mean, when you look at where the Steelers started off, and I was going by NFL.com, I mean, they started off since going into week 1, they were 12th in the power rankings in that regard. Or excuse me, yeah, they were ranked 12th at the time. And now, right now, going into week number 7, the Steelers are number 2 overall. So they moved up 10 spots so far. I mean, you got the Chiefs, Steelers, Titans, Ravens, and Seahawks as the top 5, which is really interesting right now. And then, too, I mean, you also got Steven's A-list, too, which is also on First Take. He does usually his top 5 teams, but he's always doing a lot of top 5 categories for a lot of things, all sports, but including like the last few seasons, including with the NFL. Right now, the Steelers for the last 2 weeks, according to his list right now, when you look at Steelers have made it number 5 for back-to-back weeks. I mean, this is a team who hasn't made on until the last couple of weeks, until the last week is when they finally started appearing on there. And for his top 5 list for this week, I mean, following week number 6, he has the Titans at number 1, followed by the Seahawks, Chiefs, Ravens at 4, and then the Steelers at number 5 for following the conclusion of week 6. I mean, that's just right now, too. I think the Steelers right now are in a good situation. I think one of the many things we've been learning about right now, too, is the Steelers are going to be able to make any type of acquisitions right now. And I was listening to this on the Arthur Moats Experience podcast with Moats and Deke. And basically what they were saying, more particularly Arthur Moats, was that if the Steelers do happen to get like a street free agent, someone who has been released, the only biggest problem that we run into is guys will have to be self-quarantining for at least 2 weeks because of COVID protocol with the COVID-19 coronavirus. Because when you do get released, you got to make sure that they're passing all tests, make sure they're producing negative tests as opposed to positive tests. I mean, that is one thing. But then if you do happen to trade for someone, the biggest thing, you got to make sure they're up to NFL speed. And I think that is the biggest thing right now, too. And we're going to get into that in just a moment here from Ed Bouchette. Well, those sound some very interesting scenarios right now. And it is very rare. I mean, let's be honest. The Steelers hardly ever make, trades like this during the deadline. I mean, it's a fact. They're a team that's very hesitant about mortgaging their future and really make things during the season. If they're going to make any type of moves, it's usually during the off season. I mean, prior to the start of the season, that whole off season until the start of the regular season. I mean, during the regular season, it's not really too likely. And it seems like, the Steelers are going to be a little bit more comfortable going with inside linebacker by committee. Because remember, Devin Bush was that left inside linebacker here. But, at the end of the day, too, we're looking at
offseason until the start of the regular season.
Art Rooney the second, when you look at, his 4th year, since his father's passed, I wouldn't be surprised if the Steelers are able to make a move once again. Last year they broke precedent right there that Ed Bouchette noted. Remember, don't forget, because when they did do that last season, they did it on 3 levels, according to Ed Bouchette. When they traded Josh Dobbs to the Jaguars on September 19th, then they acquired Mika Fitzpatrick from Miami the following week. 2 weeks later, basically. And then Nick Vanette from the Seahawks on the 25th. So those are things right there to keep in mind in that area. And when you really look at it too, another thing too, Bill Cowher's even talking with a guy like Ed Bouchette, and really, if they're going to be making any type of moves, it's really kind of like a not really type of thing. Bill Cowher, I think he's made some noticeable comments about that. When looking at it, and basically he says that he doesn't think they don't need to make any trades. And this is coming from Bill Cowher, in quote. I look at the Steelers now, honestly, I don't see a specific need. He goes on to say, obviously, there's some health issues on the offensive line, but man, I'll tell you, I think they're deep everywhere. I think they feel good about their team. I don't think someone would agree right there. And I just really feel like right now, too, the beauty about this thing is you don't want to see anyone get hurt for any significant time or being lost for a season at any point. But I do believe versus like 3 years ago, when you lost a guy like Ryan Shazier, you're giving yourself much more time to prepare. I mean, you got many more weeks. It's not like it was in the final month of the season left to go, where basically, I mean, when they're running a hot winning streak at that point in time, I mean, basically at that point, I mean, that season, remember, they were 3-2. They finished off the season 13-3. They went 10-1 down the stretch and were able to get the number 2 seed, despite arguably they probably cost a game against the New England Patriots. I mean, the following week. But at the end of the day, I mean, they were able to still secure enough positioning. I mean, it's what they had to do for the playoffs. And you can definitely make the argument that they were not the same defense, which is probably why they lost to the Jaguars in the divisional round in that bye. And just things were just way off. It was just a fact of the matter. The bottom line is, I really do feel like Mike Tomlin's got this team a lot more prepared. And like I said, let's also be honest, too, when you also look, I mean, at the benefits of having an expanded practice squad where you can have up to 16 players on your squad, I think makes a huge difference right here. It really does. And at the end of the day, too, I mean, I'm liking the fact when you really look at it here, I mean, you currently got about 15 players on here. And you know what? I mean, for situations like this, it definitely helps to get a lot more depth, a lot more guys in the rotation, especially going on with COVID. Obviously, this wasn't a COVID situation, but you get the benefits of having a little bit more guys on here. And we'll only find out. I'd like to get your opinions on this as we continue to keep this podcast rolling. What do you guys feel right now? Do you think the Steelers are going to be making a move by the deadline, or they're going to stick with what they have? I definitely want to hear from you. Please feel free to leave me a comment in the comment box here on the Facebook page, which is the Mass Steel Podcast, and also on Instagram, which is at Mass Steel Nation. Definitely want to hear more from you. It was against this a lot more deeper right now. Definitely right now, one of the biggest focuses going into this week is trying to defend against a guy like Derrick Henry. I mean, who's arguably been a guy who's one of the most dominating running backs we haven't seen in a while. I mean, it's his turn right now. Guy who's been right now a guy drafted in the second round, 45th overall, out of Alabama right now. I mean, and this guy right here set a career high in scrimmage yards last year with 1,746 yards, with 206 of those yards came from receiving, which was also a career high. And he also had a career high in receiving touchdowns, which was 2 at that point. This year right now, through 5 games, he's got 26. I mean, he's got 84 receiving yards off of 8 receptions, 0 touchdowns in receiving. But right now, he's starting off at 588 yards pretty much, and 118 yards per game almost. And if we look at where he's going to be set to be on pace, I mean, for this season, I mean, with the games they got remaining, this guy's on pace to go for at least close to or over 1,300 yards for the season. I mean, this is a guy who's definitely been arguably their MVP down the stretch when they got into the playoffs. And were really able just playing a hot hand. Also just having a hot defense right there. They did not get the division, but they were able to just knock off the Ravens in the divisional round at the end of the day. And they really just made their presence felt. They were not going to be backing down for anybody. I mean, I would not be surprised if the Steelers get their first loss of the season this week against the Titans, just simply because it's going to be your first week adapting without Devin Bush. I really do believe his presence is going to be missed, but I don't think it's going to be all that bad. If anything, if they lose, it'll probably be in a close game. But I mean, I'm not saying it's going to be a loss. I'm just saying I would not be surprised it's their first loss of the season. I mean, they haven't started off this hot in a long while. And just the defense overall from what they've been able to do right now. I mean, you're just really just playing with house money here at the end of the day, and just really just doing a lot. I mean, when you look at it, I mean, and for right now too, one of the biggest things I'm really impressed with, plus 62 in point differential for the season, plus 62, which is real good. And just to find out how good that is, we're going to take a look right now as currently constructed in the NFL standings, where that ranks amongst teams right now. I mean, when we take a look at it, I mean, that's number 2 behind the Ravens. So the Ravens got a point differential of 75, followed by the Steelers, which is 62. Then you got the Buccaneers at 55, Cardinals at 54, and the Chiefs at 48. I mean, and that's the bottom line for right now. And pretty much all those teams right there are pretty much playoff contenders, which having no higher than 2 losses. Plus 62, second most point differential in the NFL. And I really got to believe, too, right now, are we going to see more? I mean, I'm not expecting a lot for the Steelers to, really slow down Henry, but I think they could do enough to contain him. I mean, the thing is, too, I mean, they've been able to stop guys like Saquon Barkley, Kareem Hunt, I mean, throughout the season. I mean, those have been your biggest obstacles so far. And we've seen what happened with Saquon Barkley, who actually got his season ended, I think, during the week 2 matchup versus the Bears in Soldier Field. And I'm just really just an awestruck what they've been doing. And one of the things, too, I think that explains a lot for their running defense, too. I mean, there's also another stat here on footballoutsiders.com, /NFL/defensive-line/2020. Pittsburgh Steelers, as far as stuffed percentage, stuffed stats, they're ranked number 1 as far as stuffing teams running the ball or at the line of scrimmage or losing yardage. Their stuff percentage rate is 32%, which is number 1. You got the top 10 right now, followed by the Steelers. You got the Buccaneers, the Jets, Eagles, Saints, Falcons, Ravens, Niners, Washington Football Team, and the Indianapolis Colts. And I got to really believe that's got to be one of the things right here that stands out a lot to me. Number 1 in stuff percentage. And that's a big reason why. I mean, you're able to, probably get some of these double teams on here. The thing is, I mean, Derrick Henry's power, I think, is more when he goes up the middle. And I really believe right now, I mean, the Steelers, what they're going to be doing here, they're going to be finding ways to try and keep this guy contained somehow, some way. And we'll see what happens here for this contest. But I really do believe right now the Steelers are ready. We also look at some of the other matchups, too, going into this Steelers versus Titans game. Steelers are number 1 in yards allowed, number 1 in points defense. And then takeaways are pretty close right now. The Steelers just barely edge out the Titans in takeaways. They're ranked 7th with 9 total. Titans also got 9 for the year. And then, too, I mean, the Steelers, I mean, good so far. Their completion percentage against quarterbacks, they got the second most allowed completion percentages by quarterbacks. So that's very good right there. They're allowing only 59% of percentages to be completed. The Titans are 20th at 66.1 percentage. The only thing I'm really just getting a little concerned with has been their red zone defense, which has been taking a dip, I want to say, since their matchup following the Steelers versus Broncos. I think they were like in the top 3 or 4 at that point. Right now, their red zone defense right now is ranked 13th, allowing nearly 62% of scores being in the red zone. That would be the only thing I'd really like to see slow down a little bit. I really think they got to get that a little bit figured out. And I really do believe a lot of it, too, is because the way they blitz often. I mean, they're one of the top blitzers in the league as far as, like, going after the quarterback, how much they want to dial up the blitz. And I really do believe, and I maintained it many a times before, is that you end up paying the price for that. You end up getting burned on big plays right there. You allow the quarterback to get a little bit more room to run, even though you are sending these guys, just some of the packages where you're including like defenders, not just your defensive line or your linebackers. But I just feel like sometimes you got to be a little bit more balanced. But at the end of the day, too, I mean, listen, you're allowing the fewest total yards. It's translating into being number one in points in scoring defense. So, I mean, if you weigh those factors out at the end of the day, I guess it's working. But at times, I just really feel like right now, I mean, the Browns right now, listen, they were a hot team. They were able to get away with it, holding them down to 7 points. I mean, and you know what? The good thing I liked about that last matchup against the Browns, they finally did it against a winning team on their schedule. All the other teams were losing teams that they were allowing to score like a little over 20 points a game. I mean, that's just the bottom line right here. And I really do believe, I mean, when you take a look at it for there, I mean, at those times, I mean, and when you really try and break it down, I mean, at that point, they were allowing 87 points in 4 games. I mean, which was about close to 22 points per game. That wasn't really good right there, if you ask me. I really do feel like that was one of the things right there where they're paying the piper for it. So let's get into some other notables here on this opening drive right now. Coach Tomlin, Titans running back there, and Derrick Henry. This is like Bud Dupree running the football, but on offense. He did mention that Devin Bush was having his surgery on his ACL. Today, he mentioned that in his yesterday weekly press conference, which was on Tuesday. And those are the other things noted on here. Also, let's get back into Ed Bouchette, like I mentioned a little bit earlier from the Athletic. He notes like how the Steelers rarely make any trades in season, particularly ones in which they acquire players. And I mean, he talks about like how they rarely did that within 35 years, 1984 being the last legitimately one where they did, aside from Minka Fitzpatrick, and where they're able to get in there. And one of the guys they traded for back in 1984, they were able to acquire Steve August, a Jeanette, Pennsylvania native from Seattle on October 9th. It was famous because Seattle traded the second overall pick in the 1977 NFL draft to Dallas for, among other things, the Cowboys' first-round pick at number 14. Dallas then used the number 2 overall pick to select a guy out of University of Pittsburgh. You may know his name, national champion, Tony Dorsett, another Pittsburgh area native. Steve August wanted to play in 5 games for 1984 and started only 1, and he's pretty much a wash after that. They waived him the next year. The Jets claimed him, but he was injured and never played again. Also, there was another one back in 2013, which considered a non-trade simply for this. And the one guy that he was talking about back in 2013, they were able to trade for tackle Levi Brown from the Cardinals for a conditional 2014 draft choice. Brown was hurt warming up during the first day of his game with the Steelers, went on injury reserves, and never played a snap for them. The conditions for the pick weren't met, so Brown cost the Steelers nothing but a salary, so he says we're not counting that one. And also, too, in between those 2 years I just mentioned, back in 1993, Steelers traded Tim Worley to the Bears. Did not get a player in return except for a future fifth-round draft pick. And those are the only notable things right there. So pretty much read between the lines right here when you hear Ed Bouchette making this comment. It really sounds highly unlikely that the Steelers are going to be making any moves by the deadline. And it just seems like they got a little bit more confident in what they have. But I definitely like to see if these next 2 weeks, they have to go 2-0, and they're able, these next 2 weeks, get away with scoring, only allowing like 30, 35 points. You may not even need a guy by the deadline. I have enough confidence right now in this team when I look at it. And they got plenty of time to, keep things up. When you look at the backup left inside linebacker position behind Devin Bush, you have Marcus Allen. Obviously, the last few injury reports with Marcus Allen on this team here, aside from that, last time he was on the injury report was going into week 5 against the Eagles, and where he had a foot injury. And that he did not practice. He was ruled out for that contest. And for, this past weekend's game, he wasn't ineligible, but he was for the Eagles game. Then we also look behind Marcus Allen. Aside from Robert Spillane, you got Ulysses Gilbert right now. Don't forget, Ulysses Gilbert right now, who's really trying to make a name for, himself right now, coming in here. Don't forget, he was selected in the 6th round of the 2019 NFL Draft out of Akron, Ohio, right here. He had 0% of snaps being played. I want to say he spent his time in the practice squad for most of that year, but still, you got to wonder how much is he going to be a contributor. He played mainly special teams snaps last year back in 2019. He had 150 snaps off that time, 35%. 13 snaps played on special teams this year for 10%. So he's playing a total of 8 games. So never on the practice squad. I just slipped up on that. But that's where we look at right now with that. So Robert Spillane right now, too, technically on this team, when we look at, he was pretty much back up to like Vince Williams. So I could probably see them, from the practice squad, probably calling up some guys. But the only problem is when you look at their current practice squad, the way it's currently constructed, you got Jerome Elliott right there who's still on there. I wonder if he'd be a guy that'd be willing to be called up. Just in case something happens to Vince Williams. Vince Williams is mainly, knows for special plays on the field. Third down playmaker. Pretty much most of the time. He's not usually on the field a whole lot. But, a guy like Vince Williams, too, at the end of the day, he's a big stopper a lot of times. And that's his specialty, with this team being in his 8th season. And right now, so far, for this season, when we look at it, he's matching his career high in snap counts with 75%. Got 231 so far throughout the year. Given the fact that this guy has never been a Pro Bowler, but he's also one of these guys who's willing to go to war for this team when needed upon and make his contribution, make his presence felt. I mean, Vinny Mac Williams, I mean, is definitely a third down stopper, in my opinion. So let's go ahead and get ready to get into it. Let's get ready to wrap this up. Fair foul topic number one. The Steelers will make a move by the November 3rd trade deadline. They'll trade for someone. I'm going to say foul for right now. I'm not really having too much confidence that they will. I mean, I'm not going to deny the fact. I mean, it's going to really highly depend how if they lose a game or two here, or if they're winning, are they barely winning? I mean, if you're escaping victories, maybe they may consider it. And depending on how they look as far as like in their practice reports, I mean, who's banged up at the time, I think those scenarios will be a factor. But for right now, I just don't see it happening too much. I really do believe that they like who they got constructed on this team. And are willing to like roll the dice here and play with house money while they're starting off the season as hot as they are at 5-0. I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, a lot of that can change soon. But I mean, this 3-game road trip right now, beginning with the Titans, I mean, and you've been undefeated at home all year, 4-0 at home. Only had one road game, which was against the Giants. I mean, at the end of the day, I don't care if there's any fans or not. I mean, just playing in someone else's field right now, when you're starting to see fans little by little get in there, trust me, you're going to feel a little something. But I also do believe, too, at the same time, this season where you're having hardly any fan presence, it does make it a little bit easier to concentrate on your opponent. You're just going by sound effects. But I still feel like, when you have the pressure of live fans right there, I mean, those are the type of fans who are willing to, like, when they're those stadiums, like, shaking or really just making live and in-person noise, that could affect a lot of things as far as communication at the line of scrimmage. If you got to go, like, hand signals at times. So we'll see. And that's another thing, too, for fair or foul. This is the last one. The Pittsburgh Steelers' current stadium, Heinz Field, they're at the end of a 20-year contract using Heinz Field. And more than likely, we're going to see some different names with Heinz Field coming up. That was one thing that was on Ed Bouchette's mind right here. He did go on to mention, too, right here, some other names. Will they consider naming it? Will it be renamed to either UPMC Field, Alcoa Field, or even Giant Eagle Stadium? And I would not be surprised if they go with UPMC Field, or would they be able to get permission from the NFL and do it the Art Rooney Field? I mean, something that's not by like a company, but something where, I mean, if you already got a complex named after the Rooney family, why not here? And that's going to do it for this edition here of the Mass Steel Podcast. Once again, you can check me out and follow me on social media. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Proidgy Richey. For the Mass Steel Podcast on Twitter, it is at Mass Steel CGR. On Instagram at Mass Steel Nation. As always, leave you. Don't be trolling, be rolling. Here we go, Steelers. Here we go. Hang on.